in that very, very early stage, we often quite meet people who have great ideas, but the reality of it would be that they would need multiple £100,000 to actually execute. Could you maybe talk a little bit about bootstrapping versus fundraising, and at what stage you should think about those things?
Yeah, I really don't think, I'm sorry to disagree, but I really don't think you need hundreds of thousands of pounds to start anything. Like, as I mentioned, had background, came out of uni, did Aldi, I studied geography, so nothing at all in this space. But I learned very basic HTML. I am the biggest fan of Webflow, which is a bit like Squarespace, but on steroids. So you can customize it a lot. And so I built our first MVP there, and I don't think I'd be speaking, our co-founder and CTO is here, and I don't think I'd be speaking too much on his behalf to say that part of the reason that he was interested was because we'd already had that drive to get something out there. And again, like a lot of initial traction, we could prove out of that. And I mean, this was a really shit product, but it's like MVP is in the name, like it is meant to be minimal viable product. So I don't think you need hundreds of thousands of pounds. I think when you are looking to raise, it's worthwhile thinking about the fact that it will probably take a lot longer than you think. Our first round took us about 7 months, and there are definitely some like low points in there. We've just closed our most recent round yesterday. It's not all in the bank, but that's probably I'm just high on like alcohol, room, like everything like that. Tiredness, sleep deprivation. So we've just closed that, and it was just under 2 months. So I think you can never really predict for that, but knowing how much you've got in the bank, how much runway you've got, what you can do and build yourself, like definitely get on Webflow and just put something together to be able to show people.
Nice.
I got so distracted.
I totally agree with Steph. I mean, anything, you can do it with Excel spreadsheets, you can do it with Google Forms. I mean, you're just trying to prove the concept. And if you can prove the concept, then you can identify your market, then you can identify price points, then you can start building together a plan which you can use to try and find that first bunch of money. But it doesn't need to be a lot of money. And anyone who, you hear all these stories coming out where they've developed this highly sophisticated solution for a problem that doesn't exist. It's dumb. Find your market, then you'll find everything else becomes easy. Agree with you, same sort of story. I mean, we did the first round, which was $250,000. That took a bit of time because we didn't have the traction, we didn't have the validation points, but then you build on those, and then the second round was like, oh, cool. So, I mean, I'm not saying it gets easier, but if you identify your market, and then you can use your market to identify how potentially viable that market is to you, then you can start putting together a plan.
Just the one thing I'll say, it's interesting, we at iDiscover have a different, we've never gone for any external funding. There was a little bit at the beginning of capital brought by the founder, because he was running his own company, but everything else has been generated through the services and the products that we offer. So we're entirely self-funded, and we don't want to go for external investment to keep the autonomy and the philosophy that we have in the company. And that brings a whole different set of challenges. Obviously, the growth is a little bit slower than it would normally be, but it means you get to grow strongly, properly, because you have to have a business model that works. And so just on the flip side of this funding versus bootstrapping, most startups that I know of, they go for funding, but they can burn for years and years and years with a business model that's basically broken. It's not working, and they're just eating cash all the time. And so yes, you can get a bit of funding from friends and family, to get started, £25,000, whatever. That's not very hard to come up with. But too often it's almost, we see like people in startups making almost excuses and blaming the fact that they're not getting enough the money that they need for their great idea to come to fruition. And it's like, well, maybe the idea is not that great, or the business model behind it is not that good, because you need all of this cash to make it become real, and it's a bit like unrealistic. So that's just more something in favor, or at least in favor of thinking about, how good is the business model? How quickly could you rely on yourself without the funding? Of course, you can have a moonshot thinking where you still need like millions or whatever, but too often it's kind of like the easy excuse of getting money from the outside instead of trying to generate yourself quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm basically the example, the failure example Benji just mentioned. So we are actually at the stage, so we have some initial fundings, but our current problem is we cannot really scale up at the startup kind of like a stage. And so we either at the stage we need to change our business model completely, or kind of like we need to find some other ways. I think completely in agreement with you is when you go into funding is really why do you need that funding at the first stage? Have you already done all of the validations and so forth? You need to find that. But I think what one thing I did probably a bit different than those guys is we have started another startup. We found our own startup, so it's that kind of thing. So we on the side of our business is not really related. We have an e-commerce kind of like business on the side because it's just at the stage we realize we are not getting investment, but our app we are getting very good feedback from our users, and we thought there's still potential in the way if we can figure out the business model, if we can we are currently talking to some partners. That's the reason why we haven't gave up. But without external investment, we have to find the money some way. So it's very bootstrapping. We started some other things to sponsor that ourselves.